Welcome to Journalist Debrief with Premium Times, where we speak to journalists about their experiences on the field. I am your host, Esther Adaji, and with me to have this conversation today is...
Bakare Majeed. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure. Welcome to the program today.
Thank you so much.
Our focus today is on transparency. And as you know, there is hunger in the land. There is a cost of living crisis going on as we speak. And we have the Minister of the FCT allocating 10 billion Naira to rent. Majeed, can you tell us more about this?
Thank you so much. Like we always say in Premium Times, the essence of journalism is about shining lights, because tyranny and every form of oppression can only operate in darkness. So, but first and foremost, as a Nigerian, no matter whom you are going to be feeling what is happening on the streets in terms of hunger, like you said. Hunger in the cost of living, cost of transportation, even the money in your pocket or the food on your table. So when you see documents or you stumble on sources who tells you that a minister is allocating 10 billion for the rent of 4 persons, I mean the presiding officers of the National Assembly. When we talked about the presiding officer, we mean the Speaker, the Senate President, the Deputy Senate President, and the Deputy Speaker, just 4 persons. So the first thing that comes to your mind is that, am I seeing what I'm saying right? Because no matter how crazy rent is in Abuja, which is crazy for a whole lot of us, many of us can't live in the city centers, we live in suburbs, and in some of those suburbs like Lube and the rest, you hear crazy amount of money. But even within that madness, it just doesn't make sense that a group of 4 persons are planning to spend 10 billion on their rent and furniture. So you ask yourself, are they trying to rent part of the villa? Or what kind of furniture? Are you bringing furnitures from Italy or Rome or even from Mars? So those are the kind of questions when I first stumbled on that document, which shows a letter that the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, a former governor of Rivers State, that he wrote to the president asking for a supplementary budget for the FCT. The total supplementary budget was about 288 billion. But the devil is always in the details. So after getting the document, I sat down, started reviewing it. Because on the surface, it looks good. Oh, a couple of roads there, a couple of roads there. But when you look deep down, I just stopped doing it and I saw it. I said, rent and furniture for the presiding officers of the National Assembly. I looked at the amount, 10 billion. And it doesn't make any sense. So we started digging, started looking, started asking questions. And that was the beginning of that story as to what is going on. So because if you mention the amount of money, there are contexts to it. And that is the justice we try to do to them is that, okay, if you are allocating 10 million for the rent of the presiding officers, I'm like, okay, it's understandably. If you say 100 million, I say, oh, a bit on the high side, but okay, it's understandably. If you say 1 billion, I say, it's a bit much. If you say 5 billion, I'll start scratching my head. 10 billion, every single thing about me as a journalist is screaming. So when you not just oppose it with the economic reality and the message by the government that everybody should live within their means, everybody should adjust. So if all of us are adjusting because of your policy, if all of us are adjusting, how are you adjusting? And if you look at it very well, it's creating a trend, a pattern of a consistent insensitivity on the part of the government, where it's about building a 21 billion naira house for the vice president, or it's about buying a presidential jet or buying a presidential yacht. And it's this same government that is spending about 40 billion on the building of houses, 25 billion for building of houses for judges. So it's that ugly trend. I mean, a very gruesome economic hardship for ordinary citizens, for ordinary Nigerians who have to go to market and you are told that a bag of rice is 120,000. And when you break it down a bit, you now realize that we always talk about the bag. How much is a Congo of it for a household, to feed that one go. So that's the essence of that story. That amongst this economic hardship, a group of officials are sitting down and allocating amount of money that some Nigerians in their lifetime may never get to make cumulatively, for rent. They're not building it, they are renting it. So the implication is that maybe next year they'll be paying the same amount of money as, the same rent.
In your investigation, you spoke about houses that are being uncompleted. They started those buildings, but they did not finish those buildings for the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and their deputies. So if we have these buildings that have been uncompleted for a decade, as you said in your report, why spend 10 billion on rent and furniture? Can you speak more about this?
So, because the more you look at the story, the more how would I put it in a very, very soft way, the crazier it gets. It gets in the sense that I'll take your mind backward a little bit. In the past, all members of the National Assembly, including senators and House of Representatives members, they all have accommodation at where today we call FCT Legislative Quarters.
Yeah,
that used to be the place where all of them, including the presiding officers, that's where they live. But under President Olusegun Obasanjo, there was this monetization policy that was ongoing, where they just woke up and decided, I don't know whatever argument they made then, that it was better to sell those houses to those members. And that was how they went on a selling bazaar, and they sold all those houses to those members. Now, after that, they now resorted to paying rent for the 4 principal officers of the National Assembly. They started paying their rent. And it continued till about 2013, when the then Minister Bala Mohammed decided to start construction of projects or houses for these 4 principal officers. Earlier before that, then they had proposed another legislative quarters located behind Lungi Barracks around Katampi Extension, but the lawmakers felt it was too rural or too unurbane, and said they rejected that proposal, which now led to the construction of a new one. And if you look at the building, because I witnessed when the construction was still ongoing before they stopped, it's just Julius Berger that was constructing it. You have all this concrete wall, carefully arranged. But since between 2013 and now, which is more than a decade and 1 year, you need to make 2 years by 2025 now, is that project has been ongoing. It has been roofed, I think there are even windows and everything, but it has been left at that. So the question you ask yourself is this, is that why not just put the 10 billion to complete that project?
Exactly.
Why are you using it for rent? And is if not for the searching for it, the deliberate attempt for us to get that document, it should have just been one of those things that they just put in between documents. And the FCT budget is always not available, because to even be fair to them, to do justice to them and say, oh, perhaps maybe there's a mistake in the number, we wrote an FOI request and said, we need details. What kind of houses? What kind of furniture? Who are the people you are paying those rents to? EFCC has seized a lot of properties in this Abuja. Why not allocate one of them to them? So those are the kind of questions, and those are the kind of mileage that we did. We even tried to speak to the spokesperson of the 2 chambers. Both of them did not respond. And it tells you the level of disdain that they have for accountability and probity. And if the executive is involving in such shenanigans, it could be understandably. But the National Assembly is the fulcrum of democracy, of the accountability. So they are the one responsible for investigating whatever the executive is doing, for the oversight. And to shock you, that budget came in on a Tuesday. By Thursday, it was passed.
That was very fast.
That was very fast, which has become so. I have a theory and I have a speculation about this. And as generally, we shouldn't be involved in speculation, but I will still stick to it, is that under the FCC budget, there has been a lot of allocations for the executive. They built the vice president's lodge for 21 billion. We've seen allocations to members of the judiciary with the building of houses for the judges, where a lot of people have criticized. Now you now have another allocation for the members of the parliament. So you've captured the judiciary, you've captured the executive, and now you're giving to the legislature. If it smells funny, if it tastes funny, it's definitely funny.
It doesn't even make sense. 10 billion naira in a country where we had 3 stampades in December.
Yes.
To show how hungry the people of Nigeria are, looking for food to eat for the festivities. And an FCT minister is allocating 10 billion for furniture and rent. It doesn't even make sense.
Let me take you to FCT, because sometimes when people talk about FCT, I've done investigations in part of FCT where there are no network, where there are no roads. So sometimes we always think that, FCT is that shining places where you have all those fancy roads. No, it's not. And we've talked about it severally on this program as to even the concept. Because let me give you an instance, is that just imagine for 1 second the number of houses for mass housing that 10 billion could do in FCT. People need as little as 20 million naira to build a bungalow house for themselves. So you ask yourself, how many 20 million are there in 10 billion? That's a lot. Today, a lot of people cannot pay their rents because rents are going on the increase. Not because of just the inflation, but because there are fewer houses for many more people. So when you cannot afford yours, somebody else will take it. So there's a question of demand and supply within the housing market in the FCT. So nobody in the past couple of years have been building mass housing for the common people. The major funding for the FCT comes from people's taxes. There's personal income tax, PE. And you ask yourself, how many civil servants can actually live within the city center? Some civil servants are coming from Suleja, some are coming from as far as Kefi,
Mararaba.
some are coming from... Mararaba is still closed, and that's what I'm telling you. That I'm mentioning places that are outside the FCT.
Masaka.
So people are coming from Abaji every day. Yes. People come from Abaji every day. People come from Kefi every day. People come from Suleja every day. Kefi and Suleja are not in the FCT. One is in Nasarawa, one is in Niger State. That is reality for a whole lot of persons. So when you get all these kind of figures, it just makes no sense. And it calls to question that we have a revenue problem. But amidst that revenue problem, we have a group of people who don't understand issue and further compound the problem and say, even within the small revenue that we have, you've decided not to know what to do with that money, and there's lack of priority. The National Assembly already has a budget that is about 344 billion. So the question is, why not pay for your presiding officers from your money?
Okay. Like you heard him say, people are hungry. There is a cost of living crisis in the country, and we have a minister of the FCT who is allocating 10 billion naira for furniture and rent in the FCT, the same country where we had 3 stampades in December. When we return, we'll be speaking more about this. Thank you. Welcome back to Journalist Debrief. Now we're going to talk about his experiences while going through the documents. So Majeed, while you're going through the documents, how did you feel as a Nigerian and knowing what is going on right now in the community, in the country?
For someone whose landlord just increased his rent by 95%.
Wow.
So it was a lot of mixed feelings. But most often as journalists, we try to separate our emotions, or so that you not prejudice whatever the story is. And that is why most times we allow evidence to lead, because there's one thing about reality for Nigerians is that whatever a journalist or a police person is feeling economically, everybody is feeling it. But aside from that, was that, let me give you as to how I went about the story. After obtaining the document, it was not something that we were rushing about. So we sat down and looked at it to be careful and to be fair with that. So the number was not making sense, like I said. But the first thing I did was to write an FOI letter, and we sent it to the ministry, to the office of the minister, detailing it out and said this and this and this and this. But in my mind, when I was sending the letter, because I've sent previous, letters, I'm like, they're not going to respond. They're not going to respond, comes with a lot of, because the FOI is a law. And in terms of cost, I know how much it costs us as an organization to be sending FOI. You have to write it, you have to send it by dispatch rider who delivers it. But there's a total way of this set of political officers that just ignore you like as though it's not important. We're in this country where a speaker was actually impeached for purchase of furniture that was similar to this. That was when things were still where there is a sense of morality when it comes to, public office. But we were 100% certain that they were not going to, respond. But beyond that, we still went ahead. I called the spokesperson of the House of Representatives, and we spoke briefly on the phone, and he actually said, send me as text message so that I can respond. I sent it to him. I didn't hear anything. I called the Senate spokesperson, Yomi Adaramodu. He didn't pick, as always. I sent him a text. He read it because I could see the blue whatever, and he just ignored. So if the House of the People, or those people who were elected, not because of a certain level of competence, or not because they're better than any other persons, but were elected to complete the triad of democracy and say, you've elected some persons who will do the work. Your job is to supervise them. Your job is to ensure that whatever they are doing conform with the constituencies that you represent, because they represent everybody. So the question I would love to ask them is that, is spending 10 billion conform with the aspiration of the people in their constituencies who probably have not eaten, who probably have had to start parking their cars in their own because they cannot afford to put fuel inside? So those are the questions. But the most important question after writing the story, and we published it, and Nigerians have engaged it, even Premium Times has been linear with writing story. The story, we didn't just write it and say, oh, wow. A lot of other mediums have published the same story. But the question I'm asking is that, do we still have opposition in this country?
I doubt that.
Are there members of the National Assembly who are of different political platforms who can take up this kind of initiative and say, this is not acceptable?
Like the days of, what's his name? The guy from Kogi.
Yeah, Dino
Melaye, of course.
People you may not like him, agree with his stance, but the question is that, are there people who take up, these kind of stories? As a journalist, what is painful for me is that Nigerians move on quickly.
Yes.
After the comments, and yes, the comment is good. I didn't write it to get those comments. I write it so that we can take actions. After the comment and whatever, all I just need is a Bobrisky, this thing to take minds away, Akpai and Bonaboy. And it's depressing because they know, they are certain that you as a journalist, after writing all these things, nothing will happen.
Sadly.
So when you ask about my experience, that is the sad part for it, because for every journalist, what you want to see is impact that we've done this story. Because we could have just buried it and swept it under the corner and move on. But we've done this story. The kind of impact that we need is that after the story, then action has been taken. Luckily, they will soon resume back from their holidays. We'll be open, because if you insult them on pages of newspaper, they move, oh, point of privilege, my privilege has been breached. Now, I've exposed them. The question I'm asking is that, would there be brave lawmakers who can stand up among them and say, whatever you've done is unacceptable.
I am optimistic that impact is going to take place. So this is just the early part of the year. So let's be hopeful. So moving on, with a record of 344 billion naira National Assembly budget, why is the National Assembly not using its own budget to rent houses for its principal officers? That's in conclusion, the final part.
Yes, I've been known to even defend the National Assembly in terms of budgetary allocations. What they currently have is unprecedented, which is 2024 budget. They moved their budget from 169 billion to 324, which is a whole lot. So the question you ask yourself is that, why is it not? Because the essence of statutory transfer, because that's how their money comes, it comes as statutory transfer. You don't see in the budget where they will now write breakdown of their budget. It just comes as a lump sum. And it was fought under what we call legislative autonomy, so that their money and how they use it comes from them. And that's the argument. And that's the argument made for the judiciary, give them their money, because they play a vital role in checkmating someone. So if the people you are checkmating, the people you are oversighting are the one paying your rent or paying your salary, how can you checkmate them? That's the argument. So the idea, we know that, see, let me know, things are a bit complicated. The FCT or the FCDA as a body owns a lot of the public buildings that you see in Nigeria today. They are the owner of the National Assembly building. They are the owner of the State House where the president lives. A lot of the building belongs to them. So in essence, they own those things. But the question is that if they've built a house fixed as the house of the presiding officer, I can understand this. But when they are paying the rent, so they can decide as, okay, let us increase your rent, let us decrease your rent, whether they are happy with you or not. So the story is to bring about further conversation. So the main question is that, are we ready for conversation? Do I think we are? I don't know.
That is a sad one. Nigerians, are you ready for conversations? You can move over to our Instagram pages, our Instagram page, our YouTube channel, our Twitter handle, and the conversations can continue from there. And we hope that the government correct their steps and there is accountability and transparency within the federal government. Thank you very much, and I remain your host, Esther Adaji.